All right, guys, welcome to our first project in Adobe Animate, which is called the Bouncing Balls project. And as you can see from the GIF that's playing on my screen, you are going to make a bunch of circles using Adobe Animate, or in this case, they are balls, and you're going to make them look like they are bouncing around the screen. Now, you can choose to do just plain circles that are filled in for this assignment, like my example, or you can get a little bit more creative like some of my other students have. So here's a student who did the same project but designed his balls to be Pokeballs. And here's another that's moving really fast that decided to make faces for his instead. All they have to do is be round. So I'm going to show you how to get started with the basics of this project following my basic example. And as always, you can feel free to do more if you so choose. So we're going to be working in Adobe Animate for this project. And for a lot of you, that might be your first time using Adobe Animate. So in your search bar, you're going to want to type in Animate and look for Adobe Animate. This used to be called Flash, but is now called Animate. Now, if it's your first time opening Adobe Animate, it's going to want to walk you through a few things. I recommend looking at their tour before you necessarily dive in on your first project. So don't be so quick to X all this stuff away. Give it a look and see all the cool things that you can do. So to start out, your screen's going to look similar to this. We want to click Create New. And when this pops up, our new document window, we're going to adjust some things here. So first, we always want to make sure our platform type is set to the default, which is going to be ActionScript 3.0. It's going to default to a frame rate of about 30. This is how many frames are going to show per second. So for this project, we're actually going to slow things down and change it to 15. And our default width here is going to be set to pixels. And as you guys can see, I can't change it, which is fine. We can leave this here. And then we're going to press Create. Okay, so now here we are in Adobe Animate. I'm going to zoom out so we can see. And it looks like the newer version of Adobe Animate gives us a widescreen stage to work on. So that's going to be a little bit different than the older versions of Adobe Animate, which is what you saw in the examples, but that's okay. All right, so to get started, let's set some vocabulary. Again, the area that you're working on, your quote sheet of paper in this program, is called your stage. Your workspace is the gray area around it. Whatever's on your stage is what's going to be animated. However, you can have things go off into your workspace around. So we're going to get started by picking a stage color. When you have nothing selected, over here on the Properties menu on the right, you'll see it says Stage, and there should be the default white block next to it. This is your background color, and you can change it by just clicking on it and choosing one of your swatch options. Next, we're ready to start adding our balls. We're going to do that using our shape tools. So if you hold down with your mouse on the rectangle tool, you'll see the oval tool below. That's what we'll need for this assignment. You guys can see on the right, we have some familiar lingo. Your fill is up here and your stroke is here. This will relate to Adobe Illustrator, where your fill is your interior color of your shape and your stroke is going to be the outline color. This is perfect that we have a stroke of none. We want to only have a fill color. So go ahead and select the color of your first circle. You can place your circle by clicking and dragging anywhere on your stage, and holding down Shift to make sure that it's a perfect circle. Now, as you can see, some things automatically happened here. Down here at the bottom on my timeline, on layer 1, it placed an icon on the first frame. That means that I now have an object on this layer in this frame. In Adobe Animate, just like all of the other Adobe programs, you can end up with a lot of layers very quickly. For this project, because you have 15 balls going onto your stage, you're going to have 15 layers. So we're going to want to rename this layer. And I recommend using the colors of your different balls. Now, using my selection tool, I can move it around wherever I want. Things in Adobe Animate select by color. This is important to know. You're generally going to want every separate object that you make to be on its own layer because your layers are going to determine what you animate when. So I'm going to place my first ball where I want it to start. And then I'm going to come onto my timeline and I'm going to click on the keyframe right below the 5. I'm going to right click on that keyframe and click Insert Keyframe. Make sure that you're clicking Insert Keyframe and not Insert Blank Keyframe because there's a very steep difference between the two. Now you can see my timeline has changed again. I have another little icon now below the 5 where I just inserted a keyframe. You can tell that there's a keyframe on here because there is a solid circle at the bottom of the keyframe. Now that I have a keyframe here, I can use my selection tool to move my ball slightly. Now I need to repeat this process. I'm going to select the keyframe below the 10, right click, insert keyframe, and move the ball. Right click under the 15, insert keyframe, move the ball. Insert a keyframe under the 20, move the ball. We're going to repeat this process all the way until we have keyframes on the 1, which is the default at the beginning, the 5, the 10, the 15, the 20, the 25, and the 30. Now, when I press play, you can see as it plays through the different keyframes, you can see my animation. This is the basics of frame-by-frame animation. The different frames with different signs of movement on them put together are going to show my animation. Next, I'm ready to add my next layer for my new ball. So I'm going to come down here to my timeline on the left, right above my layers, and click the plus icon for adding a new layer. You will see that layer 2 will appear and that the timeline for layer 2 will look differently than your timeline for layer 1. This is because if I so choose, I can animate whatever I put on layer 2 to move at different times than whatever I animate on layer 1. This is what will allow us to have, say, an arm still while a leg moves, and then an arm moving while a leg is still. We're going to move on to more complicated stuff like that later. For now, we're just going to be working on animating our bouncing balls. To get started, click on the first keyframe. You'll notice that your stage will change, and the first ball that you place will go back to where it started. We already have a keyframe automatically placed here whenever we insert a new layer. If you want to make sure, you can always right click on the frame and insert a keyframe. Next, I'm going to add my next ball. It will default to the same color as your last ball. If you'd like to change the color, all you have to do is select it and change your fill. Maybe not the same color as your background, like I just did. Now we're going to repeat our process. You want to make sure you're always clicking on the frame that is directly above the layer beneath it. Otherwise, your balls are going to be moving and some will be completely still, and that's just going to be awkward. Right click, insert keyframe. Right click, insert keyframe. Now you can insert a bunch if you want and then move, but I always find it easier to make sure that you are moving your ball each keyframe. Because as you can see, since I inserted 2 keyframes back to back without moving my ball, when I inserted on the 10, my ball was still in its original position, not in the position that it was on the 5. Whenever you insert a keyframe, whatever objects you place will automatically be in the same place they were on the previous keyframe. So it's important to make sure that you are always inserting your keyframe and then moving your object before you insert the next. Your order of operations in animation is going to be very important. Now, as you can see, so far, all of my keyframes are lining up perfectly on my timeline. They should all be lined up perfectly, one dot directly above the other. And you should definitely make sure that you are naming your layers as you go, or this could get very confusing very fast. Let's skip ahead and pretend that you have all 15 layers with all 15 balls moving on your different layers. Or you can choose to do this in between your different layers as you add them. It's up to you. Some students decide to do this at the very end. Some do this as they go. But ultimately, we need to insert what is called a tween in between all of our frames. A tween is the computer calculating the movement in between our frames. So right now when I play my animation, my 2 balls look like they're basically just appearing in different areas of my stage. I don't have a fluid motion. A tween will calculate all of the spaces in between the different motions. So it will make it look like the balls are moving and not disappearing and appearing somewhere else. To do this, you want to select all of your frames that you've now placed. So you're going to start by clicking on your first frame, holding down Shift, and clicking on your last frame. You can also do this by clicking on the top first frame and then going to the bottom of your layers and clicking on the bottom last frame on the 30 while holding down Shift. This is how you will create a tween for multiple layers at the same time. Tweens will only work on one layer. They do not work with multiple things on different layers. So it's not going to create an in-between from the blue ball to the dark blue ball. It's only going to create an in-between from the light blue balls frames and the dark blue balls frames separately. Once you have all your frames selected, you're going to right-click on them and you're going to choose Create Classic Tween. You'll know that a tween has been created because you'll see an arrow pop up in between your keyframes. Now when you play your animation, you can see that it looks like the balls are just rising up, not disappearing and appearing in different areas, because the computer has calculated where the ball should be at all times while the animation is playing. At the end of your project, you should have a total of 15 layers with 15 balls that are moving. If you are planning to do something a little bit more intricate than just doing a plain circle, maybe you want to do your own smiley faces or something for this project, please make sure that you finish designing your moving objects before you start animating them. Because once you start inserting keyframes, it's going to replicate whatever was previously on your screen. While you're doing this, you can choose to change some of your balls while they are moving. I recommend keeping this simple, but I know some of you will want to do a little bit more. This is what your animation is going to look like when it's all completely done. As you can see, I have 15 different layers. And when I play the animation, you can see them going around. If you would like to loop your animation, you can press the loop button that's just about two buttons to the left of the play button. And you want to make sure that you stretch that loop to include your entire timeline. Then your animation will play in a constant loop. Once you have your 15 circles that are moving, you're ready to save your work. First, always make sure you have a native copy of your project so that if you need to edit it, you're able to. Go to File, Save As, and make sure that your project ends in .fla. This stands for Flash, which was the original name of Adobe Animate. And then click Save. To turn in your work, however, you're going to need to export it to something that's going to be compatible with Google Classroom. For this project, you're just going to come to File, Export, and then select Export Animated GIF. The screen's a little big, so I'm going to go ahead and make it smaller. Okay, first things first, we want to make sure that this transparency box is not clicked because we don't need any transparency in this animation. And I believe you should be good to go. I can't see the bottom of this screen because my second screen is getting in the way. I'm going to move it to my second screen. At the bottom, it will have an option that says Save. Please click Save at the bottom. The Save As screen will pop up. Find a place on your computer to save your work and leave it as it is as the default save type, which will say GIF image. It should end in a .gif, and then click Save. This is what you're going to turn in on Google Classroom for this project.